602 on West on Wilbur Firestone. Can I get in?
He's slowing down here, slowing down.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Force Review. I'll be your host for the next few minutes. I'm an active patrol officer with 13 years of patrol experience. Let's get to it. June 27, 2022, Akron, Ohio. Akron police officers attempted to make a traffic stop on Jayland Walker for a traffic infraction and an equipment violation. Mr. Walker did not pull over, and the officers initiated a vehicle pursuit.
602 on West on Wilbur Firestone. Can I get in?
Let's talk about vehicle pursuits. When can an officer initiate a pursuit? When should they not? Some departments have a policy in which officers can only pursue someone who has committed a violent felony. Akron police policy allows them to pursue over a traffic ticket.
Units up ahead at the intersection of Main.
I should note that department policies are not laws. Officers cannot be prosecuted just for violating a policy, but they're often useful in getting a feel for the law. Department policies can be more restrictive than state law, but they cannot be more relaxed. So, in theory, if an officer operates within policy, he's also within the law.
We're still westbound Wilbith. We're passing Evergreen.
Okay, so Akron officers can get into a vehicle pursuit over a traffic ticket. But that doesn't mean they should pursue someone until the wheels fall off. Officers are expected to continuously administer the balance test throughout the pursuit.
He's slowing down here, slowing down.
The balance test basically comes down to a question. Which poses a greater risk? The suspect's escape or the vehicle pursuit itself? When weighing these risks, the officers must consider several factors, such as nature of the offense, traffic conditions, time and location, other people in the suspect vehicle, speed and evasive tactics employed by the suspect, and more.
Looks like we have some units up ahead at the intersection of Main.
So let's administer the balance test at the start of this pursuit. The offense is a traffic violation. There is only one person in the suspect vehicle, the driver, and traffic is minimal, as you can see in the surveillance footage. Although the offense is just an infraction, there are really no other factors against initiating a pursuit. These officers are within policy. About 40 seconds into the pursuit, the officers reported that a gunshot came from the vehicle.
Shots fired. That vehicle just had a shot come out of its door.
The gunshot coming from the vehicle is a huge factor in this pursuit. The want for the pursuit has just changed. The officers don't say if the suspect pointed the gun at them when he fired. However, it will be reasonable for the officers to believe that the shot was fired at them. Why else would someone fire a gun from their car when they're being chased by the police? The other possibility is that the suspect randomly fired his gun out the window. This could mean that he's either mentally unstable or extremely reckless. A person like that in possession of a firearm poses a serious threat to public safety. Thus, these cops are gonna keep chasing him.
He's slowing down here, slowing down.
Eventually, Mr. Walker slows down and exits the vehicle. He bails out while the vehicle is still in gear and rolling across the grass. The fact that Mr. Walker leaves the car in gear as he runs away is significant. Leaving a car in that condition poses a risk to the public. It demonstrates Mr. Walker's desperation to get away and his willingness to endanger lives to do so. Mr. Walker is also wearing a ski mask. It's not a COVID mask, but a ski mask. According to weatherspark.com, the temperature in Akron on June 27, 2022 at 12:51 a.m. was 72 degrees. So why the mask? It would be reasonable for the officers to infer that Mr. Walker had either just committed a crime when they tried to pull him over, or was about to commit a crime. Mr. Walker runs away and the officers chase him. One of the officers tries to tase him. Let's talk about that for a minute. A taser is a use of force. Was it justified in this situation? For some guidance, let's turn to the granddaddy case of all use of force cases, Graham versus Connor. In Graham, the U.S. Supreme Court provided 3 important factors for an officer to consider when using force. Number 1, the severity of the crime. Number 2, whether the suspect poses an immediate danger to the officer or others. Number 3, whether the suspect is actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight. Here, the officers have a serious crime, either felonious assault or improper handling of a firearm in a vehicle. They could reasonably believe that Mr. Walker poses an immediate danger to them. He fired a gun once during the pursuit. They have no reason to believe he couldn't turn and fire on them in a fraction of a second. And Mr. Walker is actively evading arrest by flight. With all three factors in Graham weighing in the officer's favor, the courts will surely conclude that the use of the taser was constitutional. The foot chase continues and Mr. Walker turns towards the officers. They fire their weapons, killing him. Did Mr. Walker pose an imminent danger of death or great bodily harm to the officers when they fired? No. Mr. Walker was unarmed when they shot him. He had left his gun in the car. So if Mr. Walker did not pose an imminent danger of death to the officers, does that mean they have no valid claim of self-defense? Let's take a look at the Ohio jury instructions for a case involving self-defense. OJICR 421.21 states that, in order to prove that the defendant did not act in self-defense, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt the defendant did not have reasonable grounds to believe, and an honest belief, even if mistaken, that he was in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. So as long as the officers reasonably believed their lives were in imminent danger, they could use deadly force, even if their belief was mistaken. In this case, the fact that Mr. Walker led the police on a pursuit, fired a round from his vehicle during the pursuit, left his car in gear as he bailed, was wearing a ski mask, and turned towards the officers while he was running, support a reasonable belief their lives were in imminent danger. They had no way of knowing that he had left his gun in the car and was now unarmed, and were justified in believing that he was turning to shoot at them. But what about the number of rounds fired? What about the fact that they were still shooting as he was rolling on the ground? The total number of rounds fired is irrelevant. Each officer is responsible for protecting himself. During a dynamic foot pursuit, there is no way to designate a couple of officers to shoot. Every officer can perceive the threat and act on it. If there are several officers in foot pursuit, as was the case here, there will inevitably be many rounds fired. But what about the rounds fired after Mr. Walker was already on the ground? Why did they keep shooting? This is explained by two factors: lag time and divided attention. Lag time refers to the time it takes to perceive a stimulus and act on it. In this case, the stimulus would be Mr. Walker no longer being a threat. It takes time for them to realize this and stop shooting. The second factor, divided attention, is explained by human factors expert Dr. Marc Green. He says, attention is like a bucket of water. People draw upon it as needed, but every dipperful and every teaspoonful leaves less for other purposes. During this foot pursuit and shooting, the attentional capacity of these officers is being taxed to the limit. They have a lot to think about during a foot pursuit, much like a vehicle pursuit. Their performance on any one task during that experience is going to be diminished. Mr. Walker is on the ground for 6 seconds while the officers are still shooting at him. During part of that time, he is still moving, and his movements may have been seen as reaching for a gun. Although some of the officers' shots are fired when Mr. Walker is no longer a threat, these late shots can be explained away by the theories of divided attention and lag time. With all that in mind, the Force Review predicts that these officers will not be prosecuted for this shooting. We have a couple similar situations for you. In 2017, Milwaukee officer Dominique Heaggan-Brown was charged with reckless homicide when he shot an armed, fleeing suspect 2 times. The DA ruled the first shot justified but not the second shot, which was fired 1.69 seconds later. The DA reasoned that at that point the suspect had thrown his gun away. Ultimately, Officer Heaggan-Brown was found not guilty by a jury. On August 15, 2020, Anthony McClain fled Pasadena police officers while holding a gun. During the foot chase, he looks back and the officer fires 2 rounds, killing Mr. McClain.
Stop right now!
The officer was not charged in the incident. Well, that is it for episode 5 of the Force Review. We will see you on the next one.